today about sort of the more specific, we'll talk about nerve cells themselves and sort of how they are structured to work. Well, today we'll start with sort of the basics, the overview. So our nervous system allows our body to respond to what we call stimuli, to information from the outside. Okay, and we talked about this, you want to hit the step, we were talking about the characteristics of life, that living things respond. And that involves the nervous system in humans. So if we talk about main parts, brain, spinal cord, and nerves form our nervous system. So to start with our brain is obviously in our skull, protected by our cranium. It's the main control center. It's where all of the information that we take in gets processed and used. So it takes in that information, integrates it, and then decides what our body should do in response to that information. Our spinal cord then connects our brain to other nerves in other parts of our body. And then connecting the spinal cord to the various parts of the body are the nerves. Those three main parts of the nervous system allow us to take in information and then respond to it. This diagram shows our nervous system. You obviously have the brain and the cranium. And it's connected to the spinal cord. This is the spinal cord. In this diagram, it's blue. It's thick bundle of nerve tissue. But branching off of that spinal cord, all this green in this diagram, those are the nerves. And those nerves branch off from the spinal cord out to all the various parts of our body. Okay, and so these nerves and the spinal cord work on a two-way system. They take in information, send it to the brain, and then use information from the brain to respond accordingly. So, as you're writing your notes right now, as you look up here, as you see the words that are on the screen, your eyes see the light from the screen. They take that in, they send it through an optic nerve, one of these nerves up here, into your brain. And then your brain uses this information and figures out what this light means, allows you to read those words, to understand what they mean. Then for you to write down your notes, then your brain sends information down through your spinal cord, down to about here. Then these nerves branch off, it sends information to the muscles in your arm and your wrist, telling your arm and your wrist how to move in order to write those notes. So we have information coming into the brain responding and controlling the muscles that allow you to write your notes.
How do you do so fast?
Because we'll get into the details about how a signal moves from our brain to our hands and so forth. It works using electrical signals. And those electrical signals are able to move very quickly from our brain down to different parts of our body. In fact, the lab that we're going to do is a test of reaction time. So how quickly does information from your senses get to your brain and then back out, allowing you to do something. So it happens quickly though. It's measured in milliseconds, how quickly we can respond to something. All right, so we take in information. Again, we talked about this in our living things unit, stimulus and response. We take in information from the outside world through our senses. Our senses include seeing things with our eyes, vision, smelling things with your nose, tasting things. Okay? We also have other senses. We can sense temperature by special cells in our skin that can sense temperature and pressure and so on. But those things are all the information we receive, we call those the stimulus. Okay, and the information taken, our brain interprets and decides on the response. So if I take a piece of paper towel and I throw it at Nick, right? So what was the stimulus?
It scared the crap out of me.
That would be what, Nick?
My nervous system.
Your response. So the stimulus would be a wadded up ball of paper towel coming at your face, and the response, depending, you might put your hands up. Nick wasn't quick enough to do that.
No, I
But
was
when it
asleep.
came, he'd sort of duck to the side, he'd squinted his eyes and so forth. So that's the response. It took a second for Nick to see this ball of paper towel coming at him. He had to send that information to his brain. His brain had to say, better get out of the way. And then he could respond to it.
But I haven't it after.
Yeah, because his response was a little bit slow. I don't know. So the response is how you react to a stimulus. So examples might be, some stimuli are internal too. We also we get information from inside our body. Like if you're hungry, or your body keeps track of your body temperature and then can adjust accordingly. We taste things or we see different things. All those are examples of stimuli. It's all information coming into our nervous system. And our response would be our reactions to those stimulus, like avoiding it, jumping, yelling, smiling, different reactions. All right, so our brain is a very complex organ. It's made of billions, hundreds of billions of individual nerve cells. A single nerve cell is called a neuron. So again, if you remember back our organization of life, we have cells. One nerve cell is a neuron. They get bundled together to form nerve tissue. The tissue work together to form an organ, which is our brain. Our brain interprets messages, interprets information, takes in the stimuli, and responds to it. For a long time, people weren't quite sure about how the brain worked. They thought the brain was just one large organ that sort of all was used to allow us to think and move and so forth. We've since found that different parts of the brain control different parts about how we react and how we live our day-to-day lives. And at first, scientists learned these things because of people that had brain injuries. We'll talk at the end of class today about a brain injury, but what scientists noticed is that when people injured a certain part of their brain, that they often lost certain types of function. And they began to notice that when people injure a certain part of their brain, even different people, they always respond in the same way. Certain parts of our brain, they started to learn, control different things. We have a small area of our brain that allows us to speak. We have another section of our brain that allows us to coordinate our balance. Another part of our brain is responsible for our emotion. Another part is responsible for how our bodies react to other things. So different portions of the brain are responsible for different things. And damage to one part could impair somebody's ability to do certain things. And we'll talk about that. But we have various parts of the brain. And since then, now we have special ways of understanding this. Have you ever had you know what an MRI is? An MRI is like a scan that doctors can see. It's in some ways similar to X-ray, but they can see soft tissue and lots of other things. Well, they have a system that they call functional MRI, where they take an MRI image of somebody's brain while they're doing certain things. And then they can see which parts of the brain are active. So they may take a functional MRI of a person that's, for example, singing. And what they do is they look, as the person's singing, they're looking at these images of their brain and determining which parts of the brain are working. And that allows them to map a part of the brain to different things that a person may do. And so it allows them to understand how the brain works. So your brain is connected to all the other parts of your body through the spinal cord. And your spinal cord, runs from the base of your skull, the bottom of your brain, down all the way through your back, connecting your brain to all the other nerves in your body. It's protected, it's extremely important.
Oh, that tissue?
Well, type of tissue, but what do we call the bones? The vertebrae.
Oh.
The vertebrae of our spine have a small hole in them. That's where our spinal cord runs. And so those bones protect it, because damage to the spinal cord can have serious impacts on a person. So if a person damages their spinal cord, now the spinal cord tissue is somewhat different from other types of tissue in that it doesn't heal very well. So if you break a bone and it's in two pieces, eventually it will heal. That new bone tissue will form, it'll fill in and grow, and that bone will be okay. Nerve tissue doesn't do the same thing. Nerve tissue does not regenerate and repair itself like other tissues in the body. So if a person severs their spinal cord, has a break in their spinal cord somewhere, that damage doesn't heal. It's an area where scientists are actively researching. If they can find a way to help those tissues heal, that would be great, because a spinal cord injury is something that does happen to people and often can leave them paralyzed. And the reason for that, if you think about it, if a person injures their spinal cord down here, for example, well, their brain still is telling their legs to move. Okay? And so the brain sends the message, travels down the spinal cord. And then you see where these nerves branch off. But if it reaches a break, well, that signal can't go any further. The message to move your legs doesn't actually get down to your leg muscles, and then the person can't move their legs. And at the same time, feeling impulses from their legs travels up these nerves to the spinal cord, but then reaches the break and then can't go any further. So they can't feel their legs either. So they can't move their legs or feel their legs. And where a person damages their spinal cord determines how much of a loss of their body they're going to experience. Damage lower on the spinal cord means they're going to lose less, because there's still impulses can get to all these other parts of the body. When a person damages their spinal cord up high on their spine, that's the most dangerous, because if you damage your spinal cord up here, now your brain can send messages, but they can only get this far. They may not be able to get down to your arms. And so sometimes a person with a spinal cord injury up high in their back may not have the use of both their arms and their legs. And so that's an area where scientists are actively researching to try and figure out how they can help the spinal cord to regenerate and to repair itself like other parts of the body, to help people that do have a spinal cord injury. All right, any questions about that stuff so far? Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a guy who had a brain injury that helped us learn a little bit about how our brain works. His name was Phineas Gage. And I'm going to do two things. We're going to first, I want you to watch this little video clip here that explains his story. Then we have an article that we'll read about him. But it's pretty interesting about what happened to him and how it affected him.